On Saturday night, after the news broke of the hostages rescued, the four rescued, there were protests in the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and a few other Israeli cities. Can you give us your reaction to these protests? Because the understanding is that this was calling for a hostage deal, a deal to release all the remaining hostages, and also asking for elections in Israel.
So there are two different sets of protests that are taking place in the street. The truth is, one is not protest. One is called in Hebrew an atzeret, which means a gathering. That is every Saturday night. We have huge masses of thousands and thousands, scores of thousands of people coming to gather to support the hostage families. We are all in the most exquisite torment that one can even begin to fathom. And so you have sometimes hundreds of thousands of people coming out just to support us. And you also have protests that are politically motivated in terms of feeling that the current government has not effectively done what it needs to do here and are calling for elections. But those are two very different groups of people. We personally are, Hersh's family, we are trying to stay apolitical. The truth is, I don't care who makes this plan. I don't care what brand they are. I don't care their background. I just want my son back. And this sort of reminds me, by the way, we've had, thankfully, many congressional delegations from America have come to Israel to show us solidarity and support the hostage families. And one of the things that they have said, which really meant so much to me, is each of these congressional delegations are made up of Republicans and Democrats, because they make the point of saying, this is not a political issue. Human beings being held against their will, being held hostage, being held captive, people who were dragged from their beds, or like my son, who was dragged from a music festival that was advertised as being the music festival for unity, peace, and light. People who are dragged from those situations into captivity, that is not a political conflict. That is a human rights issue. It's a global human catastrophe. And so for us, we just feel that staying apolitical when this is a human catastrophe and focusing on how do we get these human beings from 24 different nations, from 5 different world religions, from 86 years in terms of the age span, how do we get these people released? And I don't want to get bogged down in the quagmire of politicking. I think it's not, for me personally, I don't think it's as productive as trying to do what we're doing, which is every single day trying to speak to influential, powerful people, and some people very quietly, and trying to create advocacy and trying to just educate people all over the world who are these hostages and what is actually happening here in reality.
So do you think the calls for an election are a distraction from the focus on the hostages and the release of the hostages?
Well, the truth is that I think that all the families of hostages, we are all doing what we feel in this time of severe agony and misery. We are doing what we think is right. And for everybody, that is different. So I have zero judgment for anyone who feels that the right way of getting their loved one out is to call for elections. I have no problem with them exerting their opinion. And that's one of the great things about being in a democracy, right? You get to say what you think. And I don't have a problem with that. It's just not my opinion at this time. I think that at this time, I want to focus on what is the quickest, most efficient, swiftest way to get my only son, who is severely, severely wounded. His dominant arm, he's a left-handed person, as am I. His dominant left arm was blown off on October 7th while he was taking shelter, hiding from people who were trying to kill him and his friend. They succeeded at killing his friend. They took him after they blew his arm off. I want to get him home and get him the help he needs and the rehabilitation he needs. And that's what I'm laser focused on. And I want to get as many hostages out with him as possible.